again in alphabetical order. And so that is Mr. Cannon.
Okay, this is a 2-minute answer for this one.
Diversity of technology.
What is your experience in advocating for the LGBT community? Again, 2 minutes.
My experience in advocating for the LGBT community goes back to high school. And when I was in high school, my best friend came out. It was it was in New Albany. And we had been good friends for a long time. And I think that was back in a time where the gay and lesbian community was not well understood here in Indiana. And it was not well understood by me. It was a wake-up call. And I think in advocating for her, that sort of led me to a life of continued advocacy. When I was in college, I was involved in LGBT activism, and of course I channeled that into the work that I did as a civil rights, the work that I have done as a civil rights lawyer, and I continue to do every day. When I started practicing, right off the bat I was doing employment discrimination work. I have done that on behalf of the LGBT community to ensure that there are appropriate protections in the workplace. And that we're doing everything we can under the existing legal framework to protect LGBT individuals in the workplace. And that is an ongoing project. It's going to continue to be an ongoing project that we have a desperate need for good legislation on. Obviously the marriage cases that I've already mentioned, going through that whole process with committed couples that have been together for sometimes decades, and representing them. I had the honor of representing them in front of the Supreme Court. And then the pleasure or displeasure, depending on how you want to look at it, of slugging through the whole Kim Davis case. But there's a lot of stuff that's also going on under the radar and sort of in the shadows in my practice in terms of the employment cases and the inmates' rights cases, advocating on behalf of trans inmates and gay men and lesbians and all walks of life and trying to give them a voice.
Well, I'm gay. I don't know if that really qualifies me to. Okay. I've been really involved. First step for me was coming out. I came out on National Coming Out Day on the front page of the Rochester, Minnesota Post Bulletin several years ago. My niece and nephew were handing out the paper, and that's how they found out. So they had a paper route. My parents weren't very happy, and I had come out to them prior to that, but they loved me. They got over it. When you're gay, you kind of have to accept the fact that wherever you go, whatever you do, you're gonna have to deal with that. As far as supporting the LGBT community, I haven't had the ability to do so because of my job, but I'm very active with my friends. In the past, I've worked with District 202 up in Minneapolis when I was living up there several years ago. That was youth that get kicked out of their homes by their parents when they find out they're gay. Softball teams. I've worked on HIV testing and support, community work, getting out and getting those folks in to be tested. Also, it's just too numerous. I've even dressed up as Cindy Brady from the Brady Bunch and done drag. So we raised like $5,000. That was a softball thing. So if you guys see a picture of that anywhere else, I refuse to shave my beard no matter what happens. So it's really kind of it's just a matter. It's just part of my life. It's part of the fabric of who I am. So I'll always be outreach and service no matter what.
Well, I think the statute of limitations has run on this, so I can tell you that one of my first acts as an ally was as a teenager. Went out with my sister, who's bi. In the middle of the night, we we put on all black and we went out because there was a big anti-gay graffiti in our town in Bloomington, and it was actually an entire intersection of a street. And so we spray painted over it with black spray paint, and we were really proud that we got that done and we did not get caught. But now it's out and you can tell everyone, and we'll hope the statute of limitations has run. You know, I can tell you that it's been very important to me in my career, both as a practicing attorney and working as a policy advocate, to try to do things to achieve better protections in law for LGBTQ people. So when I was drafting state legislation to strengthen equal pay protections, I included gender identity protections in that law, making that state law, I think, possibly the first of its kind, actually, to have protections for transgender workers who were subject to pay discrimination, because when transgender women transition, they suffer like a 30% pay gap when they transition. So that was important to me to do that. As I said, I had the opportunity to work with the Human Rights Campaign when I worked at the National Women's Law Center on interpreting Title IX, which is the title that protects students in education from sex discrimination, to include sexual orientation and gender identity. And then, of course, the Obama administration put that into guidance that the Department of Education issued, and that was then rolled back by Trump. I also had the opportunity to include the Equality Act in a working families agenda that I wrote as the labor policy director for the United States Congress, because I thought that every single Democrat in the US Congress ought to clearly stand for the idea that there can be no discrimination against LGBTQ people.